Good afternoon, Jesse. It's been a while since we met and spoke. Yeah,
Yes, indeed. It's nice
thanks.
to see you again, Alex.
Nice to see you, and thanks for availing your time. Maybe we could start the session off by you just sharing with us a little bit more about what you do, the business that you're in, and a bit more about
Sure,
yourself. Yeah, thank you.
sure. Yeah, I'm a chiropractor. I work. My clinic is in Raffles Place. I've been in Singapore for 10 years, and I originally got into chiropractic because I was an avid sports person. I was a multiple sport athlete throughout. As long as I can remember, I started. My main sport was wrestling, if you can believe it. It's
Oh wow, I didn't know
started
that.
doing yeah. I started doing that when I was 5 years old, and I wrestled all the way through college until I was 23. And then among that, I did other sports. I played baseball. I ran track and field. I played American football. I was on the rowing team in college. A bunch of different stuff. So naturally, with athletes, you push your body to the limit. You have aches and pains, and I got introduced to my chiropractor when I was in middle school because of back issues with wrestling, and at the same time I was taking an anatomy and physiology class, and I really loved seeing how the human body worked with what I was doing physically, and it just kind of made sense for me to go into that profession. So I did that. I have an undergraduate degree in biology from a small liberal arts school in Minnesota in the United States, where I'm from. And then I graduated from chiropractic school in Hayward, California, which is in the Bay Area, right near San Francisco, and graduated in 2009, and then started traveling the world. I lived out of my van for a year, driving through Mexico and the United States. I was kind of in search to find the perfect wave and learn how to surf, actually, and on those travels, kind of made a decision to continue the journey and head to Asia. Went to Jakarta first. Wasn't really a place that I envisioned being for long term, and then came to Singapore and have been here ever since. So I practice with chiropractic. The biggest thing that I try to focus on is helping people to. So much of what I see is people, they have some type of ache or pain, and they think because it's common that it's a normal thing. So I think I had this idealistic notion that I was going to help people optimize performance and become like top level athletes or whatever the case is. But when I realized that there are much more people who just, they struggle to get throughout the day without a headache or low back pain. So that's kind of what my practice has turned into, like helping people do very minimal things on a daily basis that can help you just live healthier and happier lives. So that's the main part of my chiropractic practice is in that.
Nice, nice. And when I first knew you from a couple of years back, I've always known you to be very fitness focused. You're very actively involved in the run scene, right? You're a Lululemon legacy ambassador, right? And you are
Yeah.
also active with a community group called the Brock Bells. Was this something that you have always been involved in since school days, or how did this evolve, from your chiropractic practice? Because this is all something that is totally outside of your clinic practice.
Yeah. I would say that my involvement in the community has been. I'm from a very small town. My town when we first moved there was like 3,000 people, so everybody knows everybody, and I'm from a big family. So growing up in a small community, like we went to church every Sunday, a small high school, like so everybody knew everybody. So community was a big part of me growing up. Our families, the families in the town were concerned about how your family was doing. It was literally, it took a village. There are 5 kids in my family. So we're always relying on other families to help with, rides from sports to here and there. And um, so in a small school setting too, I didn't have to. I know that some of my friends, once I got to college, they're from bigger high schools, and they were an athlete, or they were in choir, or they were an academic. You kind of had to pick your lane from a young age because um, there was just too many kids, where I didn't have to do that. I was in, like I said, 3 sports. I was in band. I played in the concert band, the marching band. I was in several different choirs. So I was highly active in. The more I got involved, the more I met different types of people, and then I, I felt like I had more of a community and could just talk to and connect with more people. And that kind of changed when I went to college. I I was a little bit. I went to college to wrestle, and I was pretty focused on my career, so I wasn't necessarily doing as much of the community stuff. And my experience in college was very different, and it wasn't one that I loved my college experience, but it was extremely there were challenging parts, and I realized that a big part of it, the challenge was, is that I didn't have so much of a community feel. So once I went to chiropractic school, I made it a conscious point to really go over the top and get out and meet as many people as possible, and and get back into it. So I went into student government. I led I led kind of technique groups and helping younger students on how to develop a chiropractic technique. I did public speaking groups. Like, I did a bunch of stuff, and it definitely elevated my performance as a student, but also I think it helped me tremendously professionally to have that ability to just get out and talk to anybody. So then that kind of carried me through into my professional career. I understand that I'm in a service-based industry, and if people don't know who I am, then they're not going to know what I do.
Mm.
So I just kind of, I like it. I like getting out. I like meeting people. I like helping people where I can in their businesses, and then if that comes back into me being able to help people with what I do in work, then great, everybody wins.
And how did you find that niche, right, in these specific communities when you settled down here in Singapore?
It took a while because I was an employee of a bigger clinic in 2010 to 2012, and then 2012 I opened my own practice with another friend of mine, and I got pretty siloed in that experience, and I was like, okay, well, I just want to work hard to build this practice, and I didn't do much in the way of, like, I started ultra training for ultra marathons, so I was like doing a very solitary sport, which took a huge chunk of my time. New I was a new parent, so I had new young kids, and then I was working on building a new business. So I was very, like, insular. My life was my life. Um, and then just through a series of kind of events, our we wanted to change our business structure. So my partner ended up buying me out of the practice, and I went to open my own practice. And it was at that point where I was like, okay, well, I know I want to get back into doing things that are in and around the community. So I focused mainly on the running aspect because that's what I do the most. So I started to kind of join different running clubs. I ran this ultra marathon in Vietnam, and I met this guy who is a Singaporean, and we ran together for about 6 hours during this 70-kilometer race, and we developed a great friendship. And I got back and started running with his running group, and they're a huge group of like 50 guys, and they're all fantastic people. And so once you start to develop the relationships, and especially with a shared experience like an ultra marathon, there's people care about what you're doing, and if I'm opening a new business, they're trying to figure out how I can help, and if I'm trying to figure out how I can help them and what they're doing, like, it's it's a great, the thing that I had found is, like, the more you talk about the things you're passionate about, and the more you share that kind of vision in the community, the more people are excited about it and want to help you. um, and that did definitely started in Singapore with the running community, these guys.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what would you say, how would you define community building if you were to put it down in, a couple of words or a couple of sentences?
Well, I have this saying, like, if it's with parenting, if it's with anything you're trying to achieve, in that nobody was ever meant to experience anything alone. Like, human beings are social. We're a social species. I mean, it's evident through, if you look through history, the the social constructs that have kind of come out of the way that people have lived are a result of like people coming together and working on something to achieve a greater good. So I think that it's literally just like having a having a conversation, introducing yourself, and trying to figure out, it doesn't even have to, like, trying to figure out what your commonalities but also your differences. Like I'm a foreigner living in a foreign country, and a lot of times there's not like a common background, but that doesn't mean that we don't share common values or that we don't share a common vision for the future. um, so it's in part of what I have found with like people, I often hear that well, yeah, it's easy for you to talk to people because it's you're good at it. But the reality is I haven't always. It's not something that comes naturally. I am like when I went to college, I went from a very small town to a big school, and I would get kind of social anxiety and feel nervous and not feel comfortable and insecure about my viewpoints and my position. Um, but what I realize is that everybody has those insecurities. Everybody doesn't think that they're good enough to, or brave enough or have the courage to step into a conversation. Everybody feels a little awkward about meeting somebody. And once I realized that, I don't really have a problem of first off talking about the things that I believe in and also making a fool of myself. And once I kind of accepted that, I just going and having a conversation and trying to figure out, um, you know, what people are interested, asking questions, and trying to figure out how to either help or just build a friendship.
Okay, right. And in terms of the communities that you have built or that you are involved in, right? Would you define them into different communities? Is there a Jesse Tim's community, or is there your practice, right? The practice community. Would you consider your clients as your community, or would you consider the running enthusiasts in the running groups that you are leading and facilitating as the active community?
Yeah, I think that there are, because there's definitely a differentiation between social groups and professional groups. And I think that part of that just becomes because I have to delineate to a certain extent about um, like if I'm in work mode, if I'm helping to train people and figure out how to optimize their running stride or work from that perspective, or if I'm like an enthusiast and I'm just there to kind of participate. But I so there is like with my professional aspect, I kind of group together the Lululemon, Rock and Bells, running certain parts of the running community as well as my practice, because I also feel there's a lot that I have learned through my own personal experience and my professional and educational experience that I can offer some assistance in helping people. So if I'm in that mindset of I want to help people, I want to be available for people to ask questions, that is definitely one kind of a different community, and my mindset is different than me being like, okay, well, this weekend I'm going to go. We're going to go for a hike, or we're going to go stand up paddleboard, or do something that is I'm an enthusiast and a participant, and maybe not like leading that.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I don't think there's any less of a connection with the people that I meet in each of those different groups. It's just my objectives and maybe how I carry myself during those times is
I
different.
I guess also if you are leading in the group, which is specific to the practice, Lululemon or Broken Bells, you sort of are the one to be defining the alignment and defining the vision or the values, right? Whereas if you're an
Right.
enthusiast, then you are more of like align, yes, and following to whoever else is facilitating or leading that activity or that group.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And the thing is too, it's like I don't, and as far as me, they both are enriching and fun in different ways. Like I really enjoy like working with runners who have very little running experience and helping them to feel better and more competent about their ability to put together, say, a training program. Like that is, I have fun doing that. I wouldn't say that it's any less fun than me getting together with a group of my close friends and us going for a run or doing some hill repeats or something like that, and then getting coffee afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's just they satisfy slightly different needs, but both very important.
Would you say also that there was a bit of a discovery phase, in terms of different challenges that you had to face in terms of learning how to actually facilitate and lead the community or the different um, cliques or groups within the larger community?
Yeah, definitely. I think that was one of the more surprising. Like my experience in leading any type of group was usually a fairly homogenous group. Like I was a team captain for American football, wrestling, and rowing. So I was in charge of creating programs and bringing people through like team building exercises with those, and then also in chiropractic school. So it's a group of people who are about the same age, about the same skill level, um, and so it's pretty easy to put together something like that. When I started to get into community with, say, Brock and Bells, or especially Lululemon, Lululemon's reach it's vast. There might be a person who is very young, who's working to develop their own personal yoga practice or running, and they're still in uni or even later in high school, or there might be somebody who's retired, and both of them have the equal capacity to own some Lululemon apparel, and they both get access to the great community building events that Lululemon has, but from a person who then might be running a program. Like I would do a lot of community runs with Lululemon. Like I need to then manage, okay, well, I have somebody who doesn't run, maybe ever. Like their exercise might be a brisk walk for 15 minutes, and then I have some, ultra high and elite high school athlete, and then trying to manage so that they both have a good experience, and that they both they feel comfortable and welcomed in the community. So that was a challenge when I first started, and in a kind of, I have this kind of expectation in my head, like, okay, I'm leading a community running event, everybody's going to be runners, but that's not the case. But the more I did it, the better I got at making sure that everybody felt like that's exactly where they needed to be for their journey, whatever they wanted to do, if they were training for their first 10K, or if they were, trying to smash their PB in a marathon. Like I was able to eventually develop the skills to make everybody feel like they're in the right spot.
And any success stories, to share in terms of, how you've managed to build, engage the community? Well, it could be specific to an individual or specific to a corporate or a group or a client. I would love to hear some stories from there.
Yeah, so the two things that pop out in my head, and one is with the Lululemon community, the other is with one of my clients from my chiropractic practice. The Lululemon running community, while I was an ambassador, I anytime there was any running event, um, I was, I was the running ambassador, so they call on me to participate. And the biggest thing that I was a part of was called this Heat Wave 100, and we created a 10-kilometer route and a 15-kilometer route. And at the time, I was pretty heavily training, and my favorite runs were at the southern ridges: Mount Faber, Hort Park, Kent Ridge. So I put together this 15-kilometer route that went from Labrador Park to Mount Faber, Hort Park, and Kent Ridge and back. And it's not marked trails. It's like it is, and we had 100 over runners that were doing it, and some people were, had never really gone for runs. They were walkers, and it was an unmarked route. I created the route. I put it on Strava. People could go on. They could look at the route. We had people who were kind of marshals that were running with us. but essentially I was the only one who knew exactly where the route was, and it turned into chaos. Like we sent out into the trails, and there were people like, I probably ran about 25K that day, just running from one trail to the other trail, trying to corral people, making sure the leaders knew where they were going. And I knew there was a potential for this to happen, and but I made sure to pre-frame everybody and make sure to set their expectations. Like, this is a trail run. You're going to run through water. You're definitely most probably going to get lost. Um, so make sure you just kind of enjoy it. And the thing is too, when I bring people on runs, I've logged in so many thousands of kilometers all over the island. My favorite part is bringing people to parts of Singapore that they've never seen before. Like, everybody knows there's that kind of skywalk or treetop walk from Mount Faber down to Hort Park, but underneath it there's this trail that nobody uses anymore because of the skywalk, but it's one of my favorite trails. And there was one particular woman. She was training for she was doing the Rinjani ultra marathon in a few weeks. So this was just a training run for her, and I ran together with her for probably about 10 kilometers of it, and just had a chat with her and about her running, her struggles as a runner. And then after that run, after she did her ultra marathon, she sent an incredible message about just the gratitude that she had for being able to discover these new trails and hills. Because as an ultra runner, you don't really, it's difficult to find trails in Singapore, but also then elevation. So it was just a really nice, like, it was such a stressful day. It was definitely, it did not meet my expectations. I felt like I was a complete failure of like this event. Everybody had a great time, but still not being run to my expectation or how I wanted it to. But getting such great feedback, particularly from this one woman who she just loved it and was able to have it motivate her through the necessary suffering of an ultra marathon. So that was great. And the other thing I had, I do get a lot of runners who come into my practice if it's for, sore hip or a sore foot, sore knee, sore back, whatever the case is. Um, and some of my favorite patients are people who are avid runners of many years. And the thing is running is so repetitive, this chronic repetitive, bilaterally symmetrical motion of just pounding, constant pounding on the pavement. So runners are commonly hurt. There's some stat that says 80% of runners will be hurt within a 12-month time period, which is crazy. So I pride myself on not being hurt. I can log 200 kilometers in a week and I don't get any ankle, knee, hip pains. I'm almost 40 years old and I don't plan on stop running. And anybody can run like this if they have the right form and they take care of their body. So I like one of my patients. He's a high level mid distance runner. He's run many very fast marathons. But naturally, if you get into these routines, you develop aches and pains. And so when you get a patient like that, it's easy for them to go into the mindset of, well, I already know what my problem is. I already
Mm.
know how to solve it. And my question is, well, if you already know, then what are you doing here and why are you in pain? So it's just giving a different perspective, helping people kind of see something that they may not have seen and give them something to work on that I know will help them in the short term and also in the long term become a better runner. And he got great results and he was able to get back to running fast once again. So it's those are a couple of stories that just pop out.
Nice, nice. And is there actually an active strategy that you follow in terms of how and when you engage the community? Um, would it be all right to share something like that?
Um, I don't really have a strategy around it. The thing is, it really depends on how I feel. Like sometimes I go through moments where I don't want to speak to anybody. I don't want to be on social media. I don't want to like get out in the community. I just want to spend time with my family, do things on for myself. If it's whatever, just internal work. And that doesn't always happen, but there definitely are times like that. But then when I'm in my practice and in something, especially when I was starting my own business, I would I would say yes to everything. If somebody asks me, "Hey, can you help me with this? Or do you want to lead this? Or do you want to do this corporate health talk? Or you want to," almost probably to a fault, I was spreading myself thin. I wasn't getting paid for a lot of the stuff that I was doing, but I was also like, I knew that it was the I had time, right? It was like I was in a new business. Um, I needed to grow my kind of awareness in the community, and I just said yes to everything. And then once I got busier, in my practice I could be more selective. Um, if somebody was going to ask me to do something, I could maybe start to charge a fee, or I could clump it together with another event that I was doing, or start to create collaborations from different groups. And that's where then I was able to really offer a different service, and maybe a higher level of service for it.
Mm, good, good. And what would you say is the limit to how large you can or should be growing your community specific to the business, or all the social engagements that you have? Should anybody limit it?
Well, I think it definitely just has to do with bandwidth. Like, what can you handle? And the biggest thing too is once you start to get busy, is having your own personal boundaries, and because eventually you cannot say yes to everything. If you're saying yes to everything, then you're depleting your resources. Your time is a critical resource. Your energy is another resource, and also the financial component. And you have to be mindful that they're like inverted on the X and Y axis. They invert. It's like you can say yes to everything, and your ability to charge or make money from it. There's a crossing point to where you hit that sweet spot of being able to say yes, um, and also you have the energy to do so. But eventually, it's just you have to have the self-awareness to understand if you can handle it. If you're feeling fatigued, if you're feeling stressed out, if you feel like you're not getting something out of it personally or professionally, you definitely need to start to reevaluate the importance of the things that you're participating in.
Would you then say that an individual actually needs to go through all of that before he or she understands and reaches that point to know, or um, can this actually be circumvented prior to even putting himself or herself through all of that?
You, I think that personal experience is a tremendous teacher, but one way that you can circumvent running into the like burnout phase is to just from an early standpoint to identify your own personal values, your core values, and then identify a vision, make a clear vision of what you want, and then you kind of align those things, and then those things, it's like you have your values and you have your vision, and though that acts as your filter. So every opportunity you get, like if somebody says, "Hey, can you help us with this workshop, or you help us with this," I put it through I filter it through my values and my vision, and if it doesn't align with that, and I know that it's going to come at an energetic expense, or it's going to come at an expense of something else. So if you're aware of that, if I make a conscious decision saying, "Listen, this is I know that it doesn't necessarily align with my values. I know that it might not work with my vision. However, let's say if it's a friend, or if it's something that I feel passionately about, or whatever the case is, I just have to be conscious that I'm going to have to put more energy into it." So that would definitely help to circumvent going through and running yourself into the ground and saying yes to everything, and kind of spreading yourself too thin. Um, which is an effective tool to prevent all that.
Nice. Yeah. And would you have, any tips, right, for someone coming out to start his own business, solopreneur, entrepreneur, and very specific to the nature of community building, right?
Mm.
How should he or she start, right, to potentially avoid any blind spots that he or she might encounter?
Yeah, I think that the most useful tool that I think a new entrepreneur, somebody who wants to start a business or maybe to uh, do a career change or something, even if you have an existing business and you want to figure out how to revamp or something, um, the most important thing that I have been able to do is try to think about like what is the goal, or why am I doing this in the first place? Like to really figure out like what's not necessarily the end point, but what am I doing? Like if I'm running a practice right now, but something that I've learned from COVID, I don't necessarily want to be hands-on with patients every single day until I die. Like I would eventually like to train doctors and maybe have an office managerial role, or develop some type of aspect of the practice outside where I can do either work remotely or something like that. So I have to start to then rethink my business strategy. So in doing that, in asking the question, like, what is the real purpose of me doing this? Am I trying to support a lifestyle? Am I trying to help people? Am I trying to help myself? Am I trying to help my family? And there's nothing wrong with saying like, I want my job to support my lifestyle, but you have to be able to identify that as opposed to saying, I want to help people. Um, because if you're driven by just helping people, you might not have an ability to support the lifestyle you make. But if
Mm.
it's what ultimately feeds you, then it doesn't matter. You don't need to have, you don't have to have that. So being able to do that, start with an endpoint or a direction in mind, and then think about, okay, well, what are the ways that I can get involved in a community that will help me? And that's ultimately why I developed a relationship with Lululemon. Like I appreciated the clothing before I was ever an ambassador. I went in there and I was going to buy some running shorts, or no, I bought some shirts, and the woman asked me, "What's your favorite way to sweat?" And I said, well, I like to run. And she goes, well, have you ever tried our running shorts? And I said, absolutely not. They're terrible. Which at that time they were. They were terrible. Like the material was thick. There was like and when you're running, like I was doing 4 to 6 hour training runs, and if there's like a seam that is slightly out of position, it irritates you 2 hours into the run, and that's all I'm gonna think about for the next 6 hours. Um, so I got invited to a research development and design talk, and they asked about like, what are the things that you'd like to integrate into the material. And then once I saw the care at which that they handled the process of the client, they want to take feedback, they want to make their Lululemon is a retail company, but they're about building community. They're about trying to figure out how to maximize or to meet the needs of the client, and they do it in a much greater way than just selling yoga clothing. So when I saw that, I realized that it was a huge opportunity to start to develop a relationship with them, because of they're not only yoga, they support spin studios, chiropractors, um, lifting gyms. So I saw that as a fantastic opportunity that aligned with my values, my core values of being active, passionate, and adventurous, and it also aligned with my vision of what I wanted. I wanted to have a world-class health and wellness center that helps people to optimize living. So it's like trying to figure out what you want and what keeps me kind of motivated to do my best, and then align yourself with the people in the community who are doing the same thing.
Excellent. That's an excellent answer. Yeah, and we're almost coming to the end of the session, right, Jesse? Maybe one last tip for a business tip, right? You've been running your own practice since 2012, so it's been a good 8 years. You're running a successful chiropractic clinic, and I understand probably more in the pipeline, or maybe even a larger one to come. What would be a business tip, for someone to work towards or keep in mind?
The biggest thing that I have is, again, it goes back to what I kind of just said, is really deciding what it is that keeps you, why you're doing the business. Like, what's the main reason? And there's, I want people to really be honest with themselves. If it's because the human body is fascinating to me. Have enjoyed exercise. I do love helping people. I like seeing people get success, but it's also important that I have a capacity to provide for my family, and in some way, shape, or form, have a business that can generate some revenue. So, because if I don't have a successful business from that perspective, I can't help anybody. So it doesn't do anybody any good. So it's kind of, you have your business hand, and then you have your heart hand. Like, what do I care about? What keeps me motivated? What are my ideals and values? And then how do I turn that into something that is a successful business? And how do I generate revenue? And how do I make sure that, this is something that can grow over time so that I'm not running into financial trouble later on? And then asking the questions about how you can integrate those, in creating business systems that align those two. Like, I make sure to talk to people about the importance of taking care of themselves, which from a business perspective, it doesn't really my goal is to get people out of pain and out of my care. And I know that they can do more for their own health and wellness than I can ever do for them. So I want to teach them strategies to be proactive about health and wellness. So it's almost a conflict of interest of me to tell people how to fix themselves, because then they're not using me to fix their problems, but it aligns with what I want to see in the community. And the thing is too, is once you start to help people and they get better, then they start to refer people. So it's really trying to figure out how you can increase or improve, maximize the person's experience of your own business, taking care of them, being genuinely concerned about user feedback, talking to people who have created a business in the past. Some people who have helped me tremendously aren't chiropractors, but good business people. Asking questions where you might not know the answer. And the same thing happens with our health as a business. Everybody tends to have this attitude sometimes of, I already know the answer, instead of being curious and inquisitive and trying to get help. That's the biggest thing that I would recommend, is first identify your passion and why you're doing it, and then ask for help. Tell people about what you're passionate about and ask for help. And it's amazing. Once people see how much you care about what it is that you want to do, they're willing to help you. It's to sit down for coffee or whatever the case is.
Excellent. That's a very, very, very helpful answer. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time, Jesse. And with that, I'd like to end the session.